We also ask that you silence all communication devices at this time. Welcome to the DoD CIO panel titled DoD's Digital Modernization. How is industry responding? At this time, I'll turn it over to Admiral Macke. Sir.
Thank you very much. I take it this thing's working. I'm just going to do a brief introduction of our panel members and then turn it over to them to wow you with their expertise and knowledge. Starting on my left is Vice Admiral Ted Twig Branch, U.S. Navy retired, naval aviator, commanded at every level through battle group. Last military job was the Director for Command and Control and Intel on the Joint Staff. Currently, he's a Senior Vice President and General Manager at Perspecta. That's the last time you will hear that name. Navy and Marine Corps Business Group. He leads the IT professionals supporting the Navy and Marine. A great friend, I've known him for a long time, and a great leader. Second is Ms. Juliana Vida, another naval aviator. If you think I'm biased, I am, but I'm also into diversity, and we needed to bring some really bright female on board. She was a helicopter pilot. She was also the Navy's Deputy Chief Information Officer, so she has a great background in this. She spent 24 years wearing the cloth of the nation. She's the Chief Technical Advisor, Public Sector for Splunk Incorporated. She provides executive-level thought leadership, and I think you'll hear that today. Next is David Cerjan. I'm not biased, he's an Army veteran. Intel specialist in human intelligence, Desert Storm, Central America, worked in the USDI office supporting OEF and OIF Spec Ops missions. So he's got a pretty healthy background in the military too. He's a senior director for DoD and Intel at Veritas Technologies. And Tony Moles is next, 40 years in the Army and as a civilian. Master's degree from Hawaii Pacific University, hurrah, in information management. He's a vice president for defense markets at Tyto, Athene. Did I say that right?
Yes, sir.
And provides strategic direction for innovative integration of hardware, software, and infrastructure for several government agencies. I think you'll, again, enjoy what he has to say. And last but not least is Bill Stritzinger, Cloud Data Center Sales Specialist for Juniper Networks, educating teams on combating cyber attacks, very important today, and secure networking, a 30-year veteran of the networking industry. And then I'm going to do 30 seconds of preaching. I have concluded that cyber, C2, intelligence, space, and everything in that realm contribute information to the warfighter and decision maker. Therefore, I call the overall heading of this information. Not everyone agrees, but all those disciplines provide data that's analyzed to provide information. That information is provided to a decision maker in the form of actionable knowledge, and then the decision maker can make an educated decision. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Twig.
Okay, good morning. Always nice to be back in Hawaii, and I was very pleased to participate and come in this morning. The subject is on the board of our remarks this morning. Admiral Macke asked us to just spend 4 or 5 minutes talking about our thoughts on the subject. I think everybody realizes, and most hopefully have read the DoD's modernization strategy. It's been out a few months now, and it talks to the things you would expect it to talk to. You know, it talks about innovation for advantage. It talks about optimization, resilient cybersecurity, and cultivation of talent. So within that broad area, you know, those are all lofty goals and certainly a place that we need to go in the Department of Defense due to the changing nature of warfare. I think everyone now has bought into the idea that the information domain is critically important, perhaps the most important, and if we don't carry the day in the information domain, the rest of it just doesn't really matter a whole lot because we will have lost the battle before the battle's ever joined. So with that in mind, what does it take? You know, what does it take? The DoD CIO's priorities are cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, cloud, and C3. Again, in any panel, in any industry forum, you hear people talking about that. We have people on the panel here that are in business in each of those areas. So I think we'll solicit some good questions from the audience. I hope we do. That's what makes this panel good. The thing that I would like to just touch on is some thoughts about what do you have to have from industry or in conjunction with industry for a successful modernization strategy. What are the keys to success in this effort? The first bullet up there about warfighter access to the emerging technology, the new tools and capabilities. It's not that there's not knowledge of what those tools and capabilities are. I mean, we have a whole conference center here full of new tools and capabilities, and warfighters walking around looking at them and deciding how they could factor into their game. A big part of the problem for a successful modernization strategy, I think, is not the development of the tools or knowledge of the tools. It's getting the tools on contract and getting them into the hands of the warfighter. And that goes to the acquisition system and how we have to do the processes from a desirement on the part of the warfighter to getting the contract polished and polished and polished and then awarded. And then at that point in time, we can start to work on getting that new tool or capability out to the field. That usually takes years if it's a significant program. And in the information age, that's obviously something that we can't be competitive at that kind of speed or like thereof. So what do you do? Well, there are a number of efforts in play. There's a lot of talk about agile development, agile DevOps in the DoD. I think industry moving in that direction along with DoD is a key and critical enabler. The collaboration involved with it moves things to the field much faster and makes the approval process and just the system go much faster. That ties into the faster concept to capability timeline. Agile is one way to do it, but collaboration at every step along the way with the customer, with the government customer and industry, having them inside the engineering sprint, having them inside the approval process from the get-go, instead of passing the product back and forth across the wall to the government, I think is critical for success. Thoughtful and effective automation and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence gets a lot of ink and a lot of discussion these days. I'll start with machine learning. We've seen some very good success with robotics and process improvement and efficiency that are afforded with robotics. And I'm talking mundane kind of task, the things that are essentially data transfer from one element to another, whether it's in reporting or whether it's and as part of the acquisition process. That has a very fertile field in which to grow and develop. There's a lot of discussion now at the higher end in artificial intelligence with the ethical ramifications of that. We might hear something about that from the audience this morning. The built-in resilient cybersecurity capabilities. Everyone realizes now as we move forward in network transformation, those capabilities have to be baked in from the get-go and part of the architecture. You know, the networks that we've grown accustomed to using around DoD, essentially all of them were designed and built back before cybersecurity was such a huge imperative that it is today. And the cybersecurity of those networks has come about by being bolted on around the edges when we saw a need. That's obviously not the way we want to go down in the future. And finally, and probably the most difficult part, is the workforce piece. How do you get the people that you need to do this kind of work? How do you train them? How do you retain them? Whether it's from a military perspective and keeping your soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that are doing this work for you directly, or whether it's from industry when we compete among each other for that same talent pool. So again, lots of keys to success there. Not too many answers on the opener, but we'll look forward to your questions. Julie.
Me?
Thanks,
Okay.
Ted. Over to Juliana now.
I'm up. There we go. I'm going to try this out. So my slides are going to look very bright. It's going to wake you up. Boom. Pink. So those of you who are familiar with, I'm not allowed to say it, but the company that I come from that's in the bottom right side of that slide, you might be familiar with the black and white with a little bit of green. So we, in September, rolled out new branding to show new energy, enthusiasm, fire, innovation. That's the idea. So if you're wondering what the colors are all about, I did not choose those. That's the corporate color. I choose these pictures just to remind, Admiral Macke made a good introduction, but it's always helpful for me to talk about coming from an operational background in a group like this, because I think that just shows, you know, having been there on the receiving end of technology or in some cases lack of technology, I come with a different viewpoint of how capabilities like mine, like those of the rest of us on the stage, that you can bring those to bear in your organizations. Okay, I'm going to talk about 4 things. Twig started out with 5. I'm an underachiever, I guess. So, and some of them overlap with some of the things he talked about. But I like to kind of take a step back from the deep technology elements of IT modernization and talk about these 4 categories. I think everyone is thinking about and talking about: innovation, creativity, of course, workforce transformation, and then I'll wrap it up with a data to everything mindset. So if you're talking about artificial intelligence or machine learning or any kind of modern technology, last week I was at NDU talking on a panel and it was about 5G, then someday it'll be 6G, you know, whatever it is. Whatever that modernization is, there's still these elements that you have to deal with, and that is the people and the processes. And always come back to, it's all underlaid by big data sets. So if you're not paying attention to the big data sets, you're not really going to optimize whatever that mature technology is. So I'm going to start with innovation. And so the definition of innovation: a new idea, method, product, etc. Something new. Something that's new and fresh, but maybe it didn't start, you know, it's not a blinding flash of out of nowhere. Just it is a taking what exists today and making it better into something new. So recently I read this book. Has anybody read Robert Iger's book, the CEO of Disney, called The Ride of a Lifetime? Highly recommend it. Go out and get it. It's awesome. He talks about a lot of things in there. If you haven't paid attention, Disney has now acquired some other major companies like National Geographic and ABC and Pixar. And his book, the underlying theme is innovate or die. You must do it. And in this group, you know that. You know you've got to keep up. And in our case, in the DoD's case, if we die, that means that our adversaries have won, and none of us wants that. So just keep that in mind. Innovate or die. And one of the stories he tells in that book I think is completely relevant to all of you in this room, and that is back in the 90s, he realized, he's been the CEO of Disney for 15 years, but there was a slump in Disney animation. They had some real doozies. You know, some of their animated movies came out and never really took hold. And he realized that as a company, even though they have all these other subunits and businesses and parks and cruises and all that, the core capability of Disney is their animation. He says, however animation goes, that's how the company goes. And it was going downhill fast. So what company was taking off and was producing really great animated movies was Pixar. The problem with Pixar was that at the time, Robert Iger was not the CEO of Disney, it was Michael Eisner, and he didn't get along with Steve Jobs, who owned Pixar at the time. So they had a real personality clash, and basically the two wouldn't talk to each other. But then fast forward a couple years, Iger comes in, he becomes the CEO, and he realizes we've got to get Pixar because they have the tools and capability that we don't have that we need. But we got to get past this Steve Jobs thing. So he basically puts his ego aside. He talks to Steve Jobs about this is good for business for both of us, and he literally says we can live happily ever after, which is kind of funny. And they end up coming to terms on an agreement, and Disney acquires Pixar, and it saved the company. So he innovated so that the company literally wouldn't die. And I would just ask you all to be thinking about who's your Pixar? Who is or what is the capability that you need that your organization just can't get right? Like you're trying really hard, you're trying to innovate, roll your own, and it's just not working. There is a capability out there, and go find it and make partners and bring it in. So innovate or die. Creativity. Another book I'm reading, actually I'm listening to it on Audible, but it's about the myths of creativity. We have these myths that some people are just creative, and they just come up with great ideas. You know, Isaac Newton, and the apple falls on his head, and oh, gravity. Of course that's not how it happened. You know, he had learned over time and kind of taken from different ideas and then added his own twist, and voila, theory of gravity, and he's giving credit for that. But all ideas come from other ideas. Okay, they build on each other. I'm going to go to another Steve Jobs example, and just happens to be coming from this book that I'm reading. So the Microsoft Windows environment, when they rolled out Windows, it was brand new, GUI user interface to manipulate the visual icons on the screen with a mouse. Microsoft came out with that first, but Bill Gates had seen that in a lab at Apple because he had been invited by Steve Jobs to come tour a facility. And Microsoft just happened to roll it out first. So when that happened, Steve went to Bill Gates and he said, Bill, what are you doing? I trusted you. You stole our technology. And Bill Gates says to him, no, actually, Steve, I look at it this way. I look at us both as neighbors of a rich guy. We have this rich neighbor, and I went in to steal his TV, and I realized you had already stolen it. So as it turns out, Steve Jobs had stolen the idea, not stolen. He had borrowed on and built on the idea from Xerox. Xerox had come up with that idea in their labs, and Steve Jobs kind of, borrowed from it, and then Bill Gates borrowed from it, and next thing you know, you got the Windows and the Apple iOS. That's how big ideas come about, is the building of ideas. So in creativity in your workplaces, though, you've got to give people the new, fresh stuff, the new data, the new information that's out there. And that's where you're going to get people more involved and more excited about being creative at work. They don't have to be naturally, a Steve Jobs or a brilliant mind, but give them the tools. Give them access to the data that they may not have access to themselves. And you will be amazed at what creativity you can drive in your organization and accelerate your mission. And then workforce transformation. I mean, that's the big topic. We all talk about it. In the government, I think you all think that we don't have talent challenges in industry, but we do. We're competing for talent against each other, and we want the talent too. But I always like to talk to the existing workforce. I think often we think about, well, we got to get more millennials, and we got to, we got to get into the colleges and the high schools and recruit early. And you do. But for those that are in the government in the room, I would also argue you probably have a pretty large workforce already of people who they may not have the skills and knowledge that you should give them to make them digitally literate, but they have knowledge of the environment. They have buy-in into your mission. They have a heart for public service. They have seen the organization kind of come and go and change, and they have knowledge that new workers will never have. So going back to that creativity idea, if you take that existing knowledge base of your existing workforce, I'll just say, for sake of argument, it's your full-time civilian, federal civilian workforce, and just inject some new ideas with new skills and help them understand what it means to be data literate, you now can leverage that huge part of your workforce that I think is going often ignored in these conversations about workforce transformation, and give people a reason to be excited about coming to work again. People want to come to work and be useful. They don't want to come to work and feel like what they do doesn't matter. Help them do it. Give them access to data. Give them access to the tools. And I think there's a great opportunity there. One point on that. So before I came to the company I'm at now, I was at a major IT research and advisory firm that puts out a lot of research, Gartner. And one of the biggest lessons I learned from them was that there was this research that came out that said there is no correlation between someone's age and their ability to be what Gartner calls digitally dexterous, or what we would call data literate. There isn't any. We assume that younger people are better at being, the coders and the computer scientists and all that, and there may be some that are, but in general terms, there isn't a correlation. So again, think about your workforce. Think about all those people out there that you can encourage to be part of whatever your IT modernization strategy is. And then finally, got to wrap it up with, again, all of this is about data. Leveraging, finding, using all the data that's running through your environment, which we know at my company that most organizations don't take advantage of. There's all this data floating through your systems that it's like, anyone familiar with the term gray IT? Remember the gray IT and shadow IT? It's the same thing, but it's data. And all this data that just gets left on the cutting room floor. You've got to find a way to capture all of that data, machine data, log data, raw data, and help your organization make use of it. And when you do, you can tap into the innovation, the creativity, and you can leverage all these mature technologies like AI and ML, and you can achieve your mission goals faster. So those are my 4 topics, and I'm looking forward to your questions at the end.
Thank you very much. David?
All right, thanks, sir. So good dovetail, because I am going to talk about data as well. And much like Juliana, I do my filter through. I came up the Intel side of the house on the human, but I was a special operations guy. So a lot of times I look at the tactical edge and that filter, and sometimes I got to step back a little bit because we cover all the DoD and the Intel community. So some of my thoughts may be coming from that filter, but I do try to look at it kind of bigger picture. And to Juliana's point about data, data is critical. If you look through the DoD modernization strategy, there's a number of obviously key goals there, but one of them within the data point is really how do we get it? And it's really strategic asset. We talk about it, cyber is great, and you've heard it for years, but over the last year, probably 2 years, data, data, data. And what are the issues that we're having? Data's not going down. And it's interesting, you talked a lot of DoD components or even Intel components, and they're saying, data's going down, we're redoing it, we're consolidating data centers. That's true to a certain extent, but data's growing exponentially. Sensor data, a lot of unstructured data, data is out there, and so what are we doing with it? And I remember right after 9/11, there was a big push to get all the intel agencies together. And they were brought together, and back then, the DCI said, I want technology to come and help. And so at a company I was at, after I got out, went and presented to all the CIOs of the 22 elements. And they said, we've got to share together, and it was breached. We can bring this together and get an operational picture. And collectively, a number of the CIOs go, I'm not sharing with them or them or them or them. And that's been that parochial or hierarchical steps, and everyone's like, I have to take care of myself. And that is true to a certain extent. But there's ability about collaboration. If you look during OEF and OIF, and as I said, looking through my filter on the special operations side of it, General McChrystal at the time at JSOC, they started doing operations, and when they were going, they started to see that they were taking time, coming back at we had done it traditionally, getting that data, getting the intel, making an assessment, and doing operations. What they found is that they can make critical decisions at the cutting edge and have multiple missions at that night. And so the op tempo went up, but what's happening was they were gathering more and being more successful because they were collaborating and bringing that not just intel fusion, but bringing data. At the end of the day, it's data. Whether you want to call it structured, unstructured, sensor, whatever, it's data. And what do we do with it? The ability is, how do we access that information? That's the biggest thing. We have a challenge that there's all this information and data, and there's a lot of intel out there, but at the critical point in time, what are we doing with it? How are we taking it to make big decisions? And I think the one thing I'm going to capitalize on is once we do with that, I said it recently, we got to be offensive with our data. I found out that wasn't most politically correct, so optimize our data. How do we operationalize our data? We're in this, I guess, super sensitive culture, so we have to be a little more associated with that. But the point being is, it's really about driving at the end of the day, how are we going to be successful? How are we going to give you all in DoD and those in the intel community the data, the intelligence they need to be actionable? You know, the first one is, on my point, is the foundation. It's critical. You have to understand your data. A lot of senior meetings I go, CONUS. At senior levels, a lot of times people are still trying to figure out where all their data is. One element, CONUS, and I'll leave the combatant command out, saying we're just trying to find what our critical data is. I said, well, what do you mean? When we do exercise or real-time operations, the 10% we were told by the components was critical is not the data they use during those two elements. Then what's your important data? What data is critical to you? We've done an assessment over the last couple of years, and one of the things we found out, all industries, so don't always think the DoD or the intel community is separate from the commercial sector is, and what they found is most of the data you have is dark data. Over 50% is dark data. It's data you have no idea where it is. It's redundant data. It's obsolete data. It's data that, do we even know about it? Well, we're worried about FOIA or worried about some IG report or something coming back we got to go back and do a discovery on, but yet we're exponentially putting more infrastructure to it. We're putting more cost to it. We're not offloading it to a secondary storage or area because our concern is, well, what if I need it? Back to my point about accessing data. If we can't access the data, if we can't turn around and try to optimize that data, we're just in this kind of do loop, right? It's just a cyclical thing that goes. So it's critical to modernize your strategy. You got to know what you have. I know that's simplistic, but I will tell you with a lot of the senior level meetings and discussions I have, one of their biggest challenge or your biggest challenge is that. The next one is, how do you reduce the data complexity? I mentioned the data growth. It is going up exponentially, but yet I think we got to be careful. Data is not being commoditized to the point where, oh, it's just cheap and you could throw things at it. Yes, it is changing with technology, as Juliana said, and yes, there are innovation and capabilities out there, but how do we transform that? How do we look at what the data is? How do we look at the infrastructure and be able to merge the two or bridge the two together? The next one's pretty interesting. Another conversation I had is protect about malware and ransomware. We're a closed network. We have multiple networks. It could be a coalition network. We're good, really. I have an article from New York Times. Actually, my phone timed out. And it said NSA was concerned in 2017 of a major data breach. Major data breach. Well, it's NSA. Well, they're a closed network. They should be fine. What happened this summer? DIA. 2 security breaches. And what would happen? It was an inside person who decided to give it to his reporter girlfriend who passed the information out. So the fact that we say that ransomware or malware is a commercial issue or it's not ours yet, I'm finding out in the last 6 months, people are starting to ask about that, you know. And it's not so much that maybe the DoD is going to have ransomware or someone to hold you hostage. Just recently in Baltimore County, they had ransomware. People are paying top dollar, millions of dollars to get this information out. Is DoD going to come to that point? It's not my point. My point is about what we're doing with that information. A lot of information that's touched or moved or manipulated can be on the inside, and it may not be malicious. It could be a number of factors. The individual, I won't give him the credit of mentioning it, at NSA who decided to run to Russia, he stole user ID and password, among other things. Now, that's a federal offense. We can talk about, and I know some people outside of this environment want to say that, hey, he did whatever act. The point is it was an inside information, and he had access to everything. So the point is, it is important. You do have strategy to it, and I think sometimes we're going to have to get a little more serious about that. I'm not saying we're not in DoD. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, as you focus on that, know that that is a big threat. Integrate to the cloud. I know that's a buzzword, a buzz phrase, but really it is critical. As we go to, obviously, JEDI just being announced, and though it's a protest, things will happen. That's just a general purpose cloud. There is multiple clouds, I think, as you all know. Being over in the European theater, talking to them, they've even mentioned, especially on the Army element, is that as the definition, they have a cloud today. So they could do a cloud environment. But it's really that sweet spot. In DoD, it's the hybrid environment. It'd be great to be a pure private cloud. The reality of it is people have to want that on-prem capability. They also want to get to the cloud, and so there's a merging between the two. The reality of it is, I believe, my proposition is going to be that hybrid. That's not stating anything that's probably not obvious to you, but how do you get there? There's always this large leap into, let me get to the cloud, I got to get there now, it's so important. Yes, there's value there, but there's really an iterative process. And back to my lens, it's a 50, 100-meter target. You have to have the strategy, number one, but you have to have the 50, 100-meter target to start making iterative success to get where you need to be. And, you know, the old phrase of, I'm waiting for my ship to come in, but your ship haven't left port. I mean, you have to get something in motion. You have to get something going to get some momentum. And in the cloud, that's something that needs to be looked at. Now, the other part of it is, does everybody need the cloud? That's something you have to look at, too. I'm going to jump ahead just for time's sake. Optimization. This one is what I talked about early, is how do you operationalize your data. This is one that's so critically valuable right now that I believe that you have to transition to, especially with cyber, but also for the future and what does it hold. You can see the points there, data sharing, visibility, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also ability that we're governed by security or protection or regulations. How do we manage that and still deliver a product to get access to the information, get access to the data so we can make critical operational decisions at the right time, at the right place. And then the last one, and this week we'll talk to it, is coalitions. One of the other things I get asked about a lot is mission partners. All right, we're mission partners together in a theater, let's say CENTCOM. Let's say I'm Jordan, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, but I only really want to talk to them, but I don't want this information we're talking about getting to him. How do we bifurcate that information? How do we separate that information? It's critical that we look to do that. And how we can do that. There's technology, back to Juliana's comment about innovation, that can do that today, that can separate the network, can separate the mission partners. And so I think that's a topic to really look at. And just to sum it up, General Kreider, who's now out at AFCEA, it's spot on. Right data, right time, right place, and in the right context to be able to do what we need to do for mission ops. So critical. All right, thank you for my time.
Tony, give me just a second. Terry, can you throw up the slide for questions? Please take that, you can text in your questions if you have them, and we'd be happy to take them. Okay, Tony, over to you.
Thank you, sir. So, I'm going to continue down the theme of this whole conversation about data and where it's stored. But I think what you really need to be asking are these two questions of industry. Is industry providing solutions for tomorrow's problems today? Or are we providing solutions for yesterday's problems tomorrow? I mean, you kind of got to ask that stuff when you walk around and you see these displays. Just keep that in mind. You know, are we going the right direction? And I think it might help you see whether or not we're modernizing or if we're just saying we're modernizing. Next slide. Oh, I'm supposed to do next slide. There we go. All right, I got that straight. All right, so I'm going to talk just briefly about three things. Follows on the same conversation. Basically, intelligent, reliable edge processing in a cloud environment, and artificial intelligence being built into that, and providing professional services. And I pushed the button, did it go? It's slow, I'm slow. There we go. All right, what do I mean by intelligent edge? So as we keep moving data and there's more data being produced, there's more sensors being connected to the network, there's tons of data, and that data is being aggregated, and right now we have a theory of pushing it up to a cloud. When it gets to the cloud, what we've realized doing several of our exercises is getting that operational picture back down to the operations centers where it needs to be is somewhat difficult, especially if you go in a denied, degraded, contested environment. If you start applying those things to your exercises, you quickly realize that some of that data is stuck in the cloud, and it's useless to you because you can't see it in the operations center where you need to be. So we need to really work, and we've been working at trying to determine what is that data set that we need down on the edge, and that's part of the conversation here. What's the important data? What is the data that you actually need to have actionable intelligence in order to execute? And it all kind of leads to this hybrid cloud approach, doing processing and storage at different layers throughout your network. Edge means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. You know, DISA, it's a customer provider edge. You know, you go down to your battalions, it's totally different definition. So really, it's defining where you need data throughout your entire network, and how fresh do you need that data? Does that data need to be refreshed every 15 seconds, or every 15 days, or 30 days? Because that drives the entire network architecture. So I think that the key thing that we're working at right now is really determining your data strategy, both for operational and throughout all DoD and coalition forces, which is very difficult to do, but a lot of work's being done towards that. Making sure that the data that is received is actually actionable, it's trusted, and interoperable. It's just over in NATO, they got 29 countries, you got 29 different, actually there's 32 different silos of information over there, trying to make sure that the right silos are getting the right data. There is technology that does that, but what is that data, and who needs it, and when do they need it, and how often they need it? That's where we're at right now, I believe, and I think industry's working hard at getting there. And as I move to the next slide, what we're doing is integrating artificial intelligence, because the only way to actually sift through all that data is to use AI, whether it's machine learning or anything else. And that's best done up at the cloud where you have all the large processing. So if you can process that, sort through it, and then push it back down. The other thing that we've not talked a lot about, but it's working quite well in industry, is the artificial intelligence and network management. A lot of the network management tasks that we're automating today with machine learning is things that we do all the time, move, add, changes, right? It's repetitive tests. A set of conditions occur, you execute these things. We can actually automate that now. There's several industry partners now that do that, and building that in is really just walking us right towards that software-defined networking where you can actually, through automation, execute tasks, which increases your network security. And the last thing is it gives you valuable insights into the analytics of your network. So you can see if that edge processing is being overwhelmed by your network, is your network actually being able to handle that flow of data to the edge. So I think that's where we're going. At least that's where we're helping DoD go. And it's been quite interesting. And I don't see it actually solving itself in the next year, but we're going to go through a lot of failures so we can reach success.
Thank you. Okay, over to you, Bill.
Hi. It's a good segue into me. From a network perspective, what's been interesting as you talk about data, it's all got to run over the network. And so as the network becomes even more important in regards to security, the automation and the configuration of the network is hyper critical. So as you go into the next generations of the network, we get into what we call, obviously you've heard the word SDN, but the SDN, is it slow? The SDN of yesterday is really not the SDN of today. Whereas one time, the thought of the control plane being ripped out of a switch and provided somewhere else was quickly learned that once you lose that control point or connectivity to that control point, your network is pretty much nothing. So anymore, it's getting around the automation piece and trying to cut down silos between the network people and the server people, because pretty much anybody that has to deal with the network has to deal with the server guys to get to the data. So as a longtime network guy, when I would go in and meet with the networking people, we would never meet with the server guys, but that world's starting to come together. So now you basically take your DevOps and now you add security to that, and then you have DevSecOps that are all kind of combined. So as the network components, this isn't working. Go. There you go. There it is. So all the pieces of that, really where the industry is going, is to try to drive that automation in an open way, try to take open standards, open tool sets, provide them pretty much industry-wide, distribute them without connection to a particular vendor, and then be able to control the network. And once you control the network, you can then control the applications that sit on top of the network. Instead of just having siloed security, siloed network, we can now bring those pieces together in a control function that would allow you to control the security both for the application and the network. So you then reduce the attack vectors, the size of that attack space that you can go after. In addition, most of the time that these kind of things happen, it's a fat finger or somebody has access they shouldn't have. And from an automation perspective, you draw down the ability for the errors to be able to take place. As I said, distributed data models to be able, once again, to tie the application to the network. But when you add the cloud in the mix, how do you extend your hybrid network from your data center into the cloud? So part of the automation tools that we're building today allow you to extend out to a gov cloud, or even on a tactical basis. When you say cloud anymore, cloud really doesn't mean the hyperscalers. Cloud could mean a facility. You go to a base. I've seen a lot of, I kind of term it as a cloud could be base 1, base 2, and you've got to provide connectivity between the bases securely atop this network or whatever. Right now, too, we're working on ways, once we get these automated, to go tactically, to go down to an edge cloud kind of compute, where you actually have to spin up network functions and then drop the compute on top of it, but they might be on a platform that's in a mobile platform or an airplane or something else. And once those networks spin up, you still have to have access to control them, but also to be able to tear them down when you're done. So, part of what we see from the physical pipes, so to speak, is all of that automation coming together to be able to offer the tool sets to the developers to be able to bring it full circle. And the net result is really a more secure overall network, which reduces the ability for errors. And once again, on the modernization side, it goes back to the capabilities of the people that you have coming in, because it is a struggle to provide, workforce to be able to take away some of the complexity to the workforce is a big push. So that's all I've got.
Well, thank you to all the panel members. We heard a lot about data. Data is good, but it's useless. Until you can analyze that data and turn it into something useful, it's just data. It's a bunch of points sitting out there that have no connection, no connectivity. And I think that got brought out very clearly. I thank all the panel members, and we are ready for questions if there are any.
Thank you, sir. First question should be up on your screen. It's a long one. While there's a lot of data, it is unbalanced in favor of new platforms. You can't apply AI and ML if you don't have the basic data you need. An example being the F-16. Doesn't have the physical sensors on board except in test flight assets to feed into predictive maintenance models. And it hasn't been an investment priority to add sensors, yet the platform will exist for about another 25 years or so. So how do you see solving this type of digital disconnect?
Ooh. Anybody willing to do that one?
I'll do it.
Okay, go for it.
Honestly, back to the technology, it exists to do all of those things that are listed on this slide. I mean, predictive maintenance is one that I love to talk about because having been an aviator and having the MRC decks and, you know, you paint every week and you clean this every month and let's talk about when you should actually fix something, you know, when it needs it, when the engine is about to fail and save money that way. That's predictive maintenance. There's plenty of tools on the market right now to do those things. Twig mentioned this. It's about, I love the word desirement. You've been using that forever. I love it. Here's the desirement, but how do we actually put it in the hands of, you know, the end user, the warfighter? And that's where things get stuck in the acquisition process. So a lot of this is about the process. Now, those of us in industry, I know we try to work with programs because that's where you can actually inject the technology into the F-16 or whatever it is, you know, whatever the hardware platform is on the end that needs the capability. But that's something that industry can only go so far with without having some culture and behavior change on the side of the government. That's one thing. The other thing is, and this may seem like a tactical small detail, but I think there needs to be a mindset change in terms of the senior leaders in the program offices at the echelon 1 and 2 to stop looking at industry and, quote, vendors as the bad guys who are there to waste their time. We have the solutions, but we need access to show you what they are, because in a lot of cases, you probably don't believe that the capability exists because you've never seen it. You didn't know that there was an automated maintenance capability out there in a data platform. Let us in. Let us talk to you. Come learn stuff. It used to be that the government had most of the solutions. That isn't true anymore. We have the solutions, and we want to bring them to you, but we need some behavior change on the side of the government to give that knowledge to the leaders that make those decisions at the program offices and otherwise. And I'll stop there before I insult anyone. Thank you.
I totally agree with that. And the warfighter has got to be involved in what those decisions are going to be. And they need to listen to what industry can do, and industry needs to listen to what the warfighter needs. Next question.
What are your thoughts on the cultural shifts needed in order for the user community to fully embrace and trust in modern technologies?
Anybody other than Juliana? David?
I'll take a shot at that. I think one of the things is, and maybe to dovetail off your last comment, is it used to be a number of years ago you would have to basically take the mission and change it to technology. We're in a place now where technology can wrap around the mission. And what I mean by that is it's the flexibility and agility to do that. There's a lot of things around these platforms you can do today, to Juliana's point. And I think to embrace it is not to fight it. And a lot of the things that are done, whether it's in the healthcare industry or finance industry, there's a lot of similarities that we see in industry that can be applicable to what you're doing. A lot of times I say this, change the skin of it, what the feel and look of it is, but behind that technology and that capability or that platform is being used today in some critical environments. Now, the security wrappers and all those that we have to go through in DOT, we'll work through those. And that's another discussion, too, about trying to ease up on that a little bit. Not ease up on the fact that we'll let it in for risk, but where are we going to be more rapidly getting to industry and getting it into incorporate the design so we can get the execution? Because what we're trying to do is bring up the timeline and bring up these platforms. The question on the F-16 ties in this modern technology. You can wrap up those timelines a lot quicker with technology. Question is, where's your risk factor? What are you willing to accept? And I think you need to be a little bit less tighter on that, not from a security standpoint, but from an innovation and bringing that modern technology to bear.
So I'll take a whack at this one too. The increasingly rapid pace of change through all things IT. Think of your cell phone, and how often your apps get updated or how often your cell phones get updated. You don't really think about that. And the reason you don't is because you typically don't have to think about that. It just goes on there, an update comes in, it works, it's little or no impact to you, makes you more secure, makes you more efficient, makes you all those things, and you didn't have to do anything. One of the things that industry has to do in order to help the DoD move closer to that space with our systems is to frankly do it better and build the trust that we need to make it seamless, because typically it has not been seamless. When some kind of update goes out through the network or the weapons platform or whatever else you're talking about, there are usually a few bumps along that road. And so a big piece of this is on the industry to build that trust and to get our processes better. But then there has to be a willingness on the government to just let it happen. A lot of times we'll see a reticence to apply these updates or apply this new technology because whatever got is working and it's working okay, and keep your patch or keep your thing over there because I don't want to take the chance that it might fall apart. And so you get a larger and larger pile of things that needs to be updated, needs to be corrected, needs to be modified, and that just makes the problem worse. So it's definitely a double-edged sword, and it requires work on the part of both parties.
Anybody else? Next, please.
This one just came in, so I don't have it built for you, but the question is, how are OTA working towards improving industry's ability to deliver on modernization efforts?
Say that again, please.
How are OTA working towards improving industry's ability to deliver on modernization efforts?
Anybody want to take a crack?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. So other transaction authorities is what OTAs are, in case you don't know. And basically, what the military is doing is asking a question of industry and having industry come out and do a demonstration or pilot to show how they can solve that problem. I think that's a great method if the question's asked correctly. And that's the gist of OTAs. You have to, as military, has to ask the right question in order to have technology come solve the right problem. If you ask the wrong question, you'll get the wrong solution to the wrong problem. And so far, OTAs, especially in communications, the network team, the CFTs, the combined functional teams, I think they've been doing a splendid job. That's where a lot of this, what processing is needed at the edge, that's where a lot of our data is coming from. As they go through those different solution sets, and they look and they say, we thought we could provide you all the edge processing you needed, and then we came into this and you tripled the amount of edge processing you required. So a lot of the information comes from those. I think that combined rapid pilot and experimental phase is great. We'll see how the follow-on to this as it comes out of pilots, because right now you can go directly into acquisition and buying a solution, which is good on one hand. On the other hand, it doesn't allow other vendors who maybe didn't participate in that pilot to come compete and lower your cost. So there's a downside to it because it's rapid and it's fast, and you're seeing what technology is available today. The downside is if you're asking the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer, and you're going to go down the wrong road. Question?
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I think it's a good step. It's nice to have options I like to go back to human behavior. So from a human behavior perspective, it's good to know that, hey, there actually is another way to get stuff through acquisitions. There's this OTA thing. So whether it's perfect or not is kind of irrelevant to the point of it's a choice. It's another way, to get through the process. And once people realize that that can be successful, then their minds open up to what other ways can we bring new capabilities to the DoD faster, quicker. I like also in addition to the OTAs, there's these competitions, these CyberWorks events and AFWorks and other. I'm not trying to single out any particular service, but it seems like one service in particular that does a lot of those activities to get capabilities into their environment faster. So I think with the OTA is a nice step, and it's not brand new, by the way. I mean, other acquisition processes have been kind of around for a while, but now it has front page press. People are paying attention, and I think from that perspective, it's really good to just get people thinking that there are other options. Let's look at what those are instead of continuing to go down the slow path that's been in place for years and years that just doesn't really apply anymore to an agile environment. Like Twig said, it's happening so fast. Almost any process with a capital P is not going to be perfect, but continuing to make iterations in the acquisition process is always good, in my opinion.
Anybody else?
Well, I think one of the things it does too is, and it's not every platform, but it's that LPTA. I think it overcomes a little bit of that as well because people are competing with the best technology. And have you seen that AT&T commercial lately with just good enough? Doctors, hey, are you a good doctor? He's like, well, he just got back from being suspended. But I'll be good. I'll see you in the operating room. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it, but I'm saying just good enough is not it, right? There's a capability out there. And there's a lot of size, weight, and form factor. A lot of form factor that's being done that we in industry can do. Why not give us the opportunity? And again, it's not a major platform we're doing, whether it's an aircraft or a ship or whatever. It's something very, very specific for modernization. So I think it's a good thing.
Okay, you got another question, Terry?
Yes, sir. What methods or ideas do you have regarding cooperation and collaboration to help DoD understand what their most used, most vulnerable, most important, and maybe the most ignored data is?
I'm not even sure I understand that.
So I guess I'll take a stab at that. So as we do these exercises around DoD, and we go through these different command post exercises, what I used to call them, we see what data is actually being used, being actioned on in different common operational pictures, which, as I've learned, are not common at all. But when you can start seeing that all the different information that they're actually using, it takes somebody that goes to all these different exercises to have that view. If you're going to just Korea, which they just canceled, by the way, but if you're going to the Korea exercise and you're seeing what they're actioning and the information that they're looking at, and then you go down to, I don't know, let's take Thailand, exercise down there, let's run over to the Balkans over in Europe, and you start seeing these different information sets and data sets that are common across those. You can start to build this. This is probably the most common. Whether or not it's most important is a big question, but it is common set of information. And then the real, I think the thing that's throwing a monkey wrench in this a little bit is the advancement of sensors and data entry points, because there's a lot more being added. And when from exercise to exercise, there's a ton of different information now that's flowing. It's not the same as it was a year ago. So adding those into it. So that's most used, I guess, is to answer the question. We can determine what's the most used through exercises. What's most vulnerable, what's most important, I think is an operational question that our leaders in DoD need to answer.
Yeah, I will just add on and agree. The answer is really it depends, and it depends a lot on the mission of what the command is going to do, and you have to have it would be a partnership between the warfighter or the operator, or whatever the operation is, to determine, where those soft spots are and where the must-haves are. I'll tell you, in DoD, generally, I think most people know this, there's a lot of emphasis now on the supply chain and supply chain data and security in the supply chain and where that's all going to go. So I don't know if I would put that in the most vulnerable category or not, but I will tell you there's a lot of attention there in terms of both procurement and design, and supply from downstream vendors in the pipeline, and how they're managing and protecting the information that they have.
I think there's a pot full of data out there, and getting it analyzed so it becomes useful, I think will certainly be enhanced when artificial intelligence matures a little bit better than where it is today. I think that will really help. Anything else, Terry?
Yes, sir. We've got a couple more. First one, how can military and civilian personnel improve their understanding of technology that is changing so fast? And is there an opportunity for collaborative education with industry?
So I'll start because my company has this, but a lot of us provide free training and free access to our tools. And we're one of them. And we want people to become data literate. We want to be part of the solution of the challenge of people not understanding enough and not being able to understand where technology is going and how to use it. So I would say it's a simple answer. It's probably not going to be very satisfying, but use the tools that are already available. Have people go to the classes at NDU that are free, or have people do online webinars, or come to events like this if they can travel, or whatever it is. I think there still is not enough focus or emphasis putting on education and training that exists, that is available, and some of it does come from industry and it's free. So I would start there because that's easy, and it's us showing you that we want to be part of the solution.
Yeah, and I'll tag on that. I think that the leadership, you have to give them an opportunity to get exposed to it. It's one thing to have professional development internally, but it's another thing for industry. And a lot of times what I've seen now being on the other side is they know what they know from a technology perspective, but they don't have the understanding of all that's out there for maybe that specialty or that interest they have for their unit or organization. They need to be exposed to more what's out in industry, and then you can make some more specific decisions on that. So Juliana said there is a lot of training there for our individual companies. I know that we can do that, but I think also I would even challenge AFCEA to try to look at some technology things and bringing people together and getting exposure to that training, and maybe using that as a platform or to facilitate that training.
There is not just an opportunity for collaboration, but there's generally opportunities within industry for internships or exchange kind of situations where DoD uniform or civilian personnel can go and spend a period of time, months or a year or so, with industry, and that kind of crosstalk and familiarization is priceless. It really pays benefits on both sides in the out years. So, I would guess that all the companies represented up here on the panel have those kinds of programs in the company.
I'm going to exert a moderator's privilege here and ask a question that I would like each of our panelists to answer. What is the next technology that will benefit the warfighter?
Well, I don't know if it's the next technology, but I think a lot of work is going into directed energy and optical laser type weapon systems. And when I look out across the landscape at the potential threats coming down the path in the next several years, I think to be able to defend against many of those, some capability like that is going to be required. So, I can't quantify that in bang for the buck because I suspect it's very expensive, but I think that kind of approach in terms of weapon systems will be a requirement.
No, I tend to agree. Go ahead, Juliana.
I'll start out with what Twig started with. It's not necessarily a next technology, but technology that exists today that is sub-optimized. And that is either ML or AI, but anything that automates those mundane tasks that a lot of the warfighters are doing and just puts that in the hands of the computer so that they can focus on what human beings should be doing, which is making ethical combat in the split second in the cockpit decisions or on the ship or on land or whatever it is. We have one customer from a joint command based in Tampa, and they use our tool to just do one simple thing to basically automate a process when a VIP email account is compromised. Because that spins up this whole process of now the EA gets involved, and now the flag aid is involved, and now everybody comes to all stop in their operational activity because the admiral or the general's email account was compromised. Well, if you can automate that and keep people out of that, like helmet fire, all of that human energy can be then directed towards the operational mission. And I think when you multiply that across the entire DoD and all the soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen that are doing those kinds of mundane automated or tasks that should be automated, you can exponentially multiply the force's capability to execute on their mission. And I think doubling and tripling down on the technology that exists now is a way to provide better capability to the force.
David?
Yeah, I think it's the existing technology and trying to optimize, I mentioned that phrase earlier, but operationalize your data. There's a lot of sensors, there's a lot of different type of data sources, and get that operational, if you will, picture. I think the technology's there, so it's not really a new phrase or a new technology is coming, but it's wrapping that all together and be able to project that. I don't know, many people are movie people, but there's a movie just out, 22 Mile. Again, it's more entertainment than anything else, but if you look at it, that operational picture from a lot of data sources, and it's interesting because people outside our industry will be like, hey, is that happening today? Well, the ability's there to try to get that operational picture. It's really taking and harnessing the innovation of today, the technology today, and putting it into a tighter box, if you will, and delivering that. Now it's just, in this case, DoD just gives the industry the ability to collaborate and put that together. I believe it's there. It's just a matter of bringing it to market sooner.
Tony?
So the warfighter, so all depends on where the warfighter is, but low orbiting satellites and 5G will increase the ability of the warfighter to communicate with each other. And I believe artificial intelligence is demanded, required, in order to filter through all that information so they can actually to turn that data into useful information. So those are the ones that are coming that are actually being done right now, but the effect I don't think has been felt yet by the warfighter.
Bill?
Yeah, I think it's not a new technology, as you all say. It's more pushing the edge compute component of that really is going to give the platform for which all this is, all that AI and ML can run on. And as the cost of that keeps driving lower, the automation piece of being able to spin it up on a warfighter, tactically, remotely, mobile, the whole 9 yards is going to give that platform for the next generation.
I was asked once by a former commander of the Pacific Fleet, how can I ensure I have command and control on the first day of the war? I didn't have to think very long. I told him, well, you build a network, don't ever turn it on, and when you turn it on, I'll give you 12 hours. Technology can help improve that 12 hours. Do we have any other questions, Terry?
Sir, we got one last one, and this relates to what Major Ruiz was talking about on stage this morning. And I want to give the 3 Navy reps on the panel a chance to predict the score of the Army-Navy game that's coming up.
I don't think there's any question. In Hawaii, we hold a Army-Navy golf tournament the day before the Army-Navy football game. And traditionally, if Navy loses the golf tournament, we win the football game. So we all bag it when we go out there to make sure we're going to lose the golf tournament. I want to thank all of our panel very much. I want to thank all the attendees for coming. This is more than I thought we'd get after the late opening ceremony. And again, appreciate all, and thank you all very much.
I'd like to thank the panel and to remind everyone in the room to visit the STEM Innovation Showcase in the South Pacific Ballroom number 1. Because I'm so close to the Admiral, I will hold on the guests for the score, sir. Thank you.